Right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 142 of the On Air Advocate. Where at the On Air Advocate, we look to provide education, support, and empowerment for all of those with different abilities, mental and medical illnesses, and their caregivers. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Tammy Flynn, and I am the host and producer of the On Air Advocate. And I am super excited if you are here joining us this morning, or if you are catching this on the replay. Now, as always, if you think this content that we are talking about could be relevant for anyone in your network or your circle, please hit the share button and share the love with others. Well, if you guys have been following all month long, and we're in our last week here, we are in our Back to School and Transitions Interview series. And I am so excited to welcome today Stacy Jagger. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, also a registered play therapist. Welcome, Stacy.
Thank you for having me, Tammy. Very nice to be here.
Yes, and I'm just so excited about this topic because I think as we go back to our kiddos head back to school, this is such a relevant, huge topic. And when I saw in social media, you know what I'm saying, you talking about this subject and on, news articles and news stations, I just think it's so relevant and we needed to bring it to this platform. So you have developed a program called the 30-Day Blackout, which we're going to get into in a little while, but it really kind of wraps around kids and screen time, social media, being on apps, all of that.
Right.
But before we get started this morning, I just want you, Stacy, to, give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised here in Nashville. So I'm one of the few natives here. It's pretty unusual for me to meet other folks that have kind of stuck around. So born and raised here in Nashville. And I'll just, since we're talking about the blackout, if it's okay with you, Tammy, I'll just give you a little bit of a background of my own story that really, honestly, it really informs what I'm doing with the blackout and my own experience of how it was developed. Is that okay with you?
Oh, yeah, that's perfectly fine.
So I was raised in a pretty violent, alcoholic, chaotic background. So my upbringing was pretty, honestly, pretty tragic. And so what ended up happening was I married a recording studio engineer here in the Nashville area. He was a professor at Belmont University when I was a student. And we married very quickly. And when I'll back up just a second. So when I was 16, I made a vow to myself that when I became an adult, that I was going to get as far out of Nashville as I possibly could. But I married a guy that came to Nashville for the music business. And so I realized pretty quickly that we weren't going anywhere. And that was very difficult for me to sort of swallow and to realize that I may be staying here for good. So fast forward, we married, and I really just needed an adventure. I really needed to feel like I had gotten out of town, even though I couldn't get out very far. Mm-hmm. And we had some dear friends who bought 150 acres outside of town on a farm. He was a former airline pilot, and so they bought a huge farm about 45 minutes out of Nashville. And make a long story short, there was a little cabin there that had been there since the 1850s. And my husband and I went there for the weekend to just get away from town and just kind of unplug and be together. And while we were there, I did not realize it at the time, but my whole life, I had spent my life in what's called a sympathetic rev up of my nervous system. And I literally had such a difficult time relaxing and being connected to myself that there was something about this cabin that was drawing me. And while we were there, I turned to my husband and said, I want to live here. And he looked at me and said, "You are absolutely insane. Like, what are you talking about?" And I said, "No, I'm not even kidding you. Like, there's something about this place. There was no electricity. There was no running water. But there was this peace that came over me at this cabin, and I asked my husband, would you be willing to live here for a few months? So we went back to Nashville to our home, and a few months later, I brought it up again, and I said, "I'm not even kidding you. Like, I want to live in that cabin for a few months." So he called the owner of the farm, that was a dear friend of ours, and as she picked up the phone, she said, "Ron, Jagger, I was just thinking about you and Stacy this morning. I'm wondering if you guys would ever want to come and live in the cabin and just have a little bit of a sabbatical and get away from everything." And so she kind of, just piggybacked on our thoughts. Long story short, we packed up every electric thing that we had. I was actually a ballroom dance instructor at the time. And my family and friends, that I'd absolutely lost my mind. We moved to this tiny little cabin in the woods. And what ended up happening, and I did not have the language for it at the time, but my nervous system started to relax for the first time in my life. And for those of you that are listening, if you have a trauma history, you may understand what I'm saying when I talk about how the amygdala in our brains, when we have a trauma history, goes into a chronic state of fight, flight, freeze. And it's very difficult for your brain to relax so that you can enjoy your life and your day and your relationships. So all that whole thing to say, we ended up staying at the cabin not 3 months, not 6 months, but we stayed there for 18 months before we ended up moving and buying a new home. Um, but so then fast forward to now, I am in private practice. This was several years ago. And after having been in community mental health, I started seeing clients privately. And what I was seeing were children that very much reminded me of myself. And they were children that were very dysregulated, that were having a very difficult time connecting. And I intuitively knew what they needed. They needed a break from all of the technology, all of the extra stuff that was keeping them revved up. And so I almost immediately started what I called the 30-day Turn It Off Challenge, which ended up morphing into what I now call the 30-day Blackout. And I've been now implementing this intervention with families for going on 7 years. So I've repeated myself a lot. But hopefully that gives you, Tammy, enough of my backstory to kind of understand where the blackout came from. And now I'm happy to explain to you how it works as I implement it with my practice.
Yes. And did you guys move, when you moved out to that remote cabin, were you already in the field of therapy?
I was not. I, at the time, was a ballroom dance instructor. So I was literally such a funny story. I had sequin ball gowns hanging under a ladder that went up to the loft of this tiny little cabin we were living in. And I was commuting back and forth with competitions and the whole thing. I mean, my students, bless their hearts, they had no idea, or they would have thought that I needed a fundraiser or something. But it was all by choice, is the truth. But that's what I was doing at the time. And then I later went back to graduate school to become a licensed marriage and family therapist and registered play therapist. And now I'm actually supervising and mentoring and all of that as well.
And I just think that experience, just from the way that you articulated it to us, I feel like that was very impactful in that transition of going into family therapy. Do you feel like it really played a part? Like you were recognizing more things within yourself?
Absolutely. Tammy, the best therapists out there are the ones that have done their own work.
Right, right.
At 19, and I'll just back up a little more, at 19, I was at college and just found that I couldn't get out of the bed. I was staring at the walls. I was in the bed for, I think, 16 hours a day at one point. Ended up in treatment at the Mentoreth Meyer New Life Clinic in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was a total pivot, turning point in my life, where I started to have an opportunity to heal from a very traumatic upbringing. And I'm 45 now, so that's been a long time ago. So all that to say, I've spent my entire adult life not only healing myself, but now organically finding this field in a very sort of natural way. So I think my whole story, my background in teaching, I used to teach music, my undergraduate degree is in music from Belmont University. And so my background in music and dance and my own story, it's kind of informed everything, if that makes
Right,
sense.
right.
And so honestly, I see probably 30 families a week, and my job does not feel like work to me. It's very rewarding, and I don't know. It just feels like an outflow of just who I am, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes. And you're right. We have to heal within ourselves before we can help heal others. And I think, and going through all those different processes is so powerful. Now, I know that today, and I love your backstory. And so I thank you so much for sharing that, because that really brings us to the point today.
Right.
You were doing that 30-day challenge with parents years ago, and now it's kind of morphed itself into the 30-day blackout. And really what it points to is how much screen time
Yeah.
our young children are having. And I couldn't believe when me and you talked, just the lack of, knowledge that what we don't know, what I'm saying, because devices are newer. It's not like devices have been around for 50 or 60 years.
Right.
The impact that it is having on our young children's brains and all of that. So I would love for you to just kind of start, kind of lending into, what do you see today as kind of those negative impacts for children, and their families with the screen time? What are things that you've learned and really extracted?
So the research shows that the average amount of screen time that children are exposed to today is about 7.5 hours, which is a work day,
Yeah.
right? And so if you really think about it, how many hours are they sleeping? How many hours are they at school? And the rest is screen time. It's really, honestly, it's a little bit tragic in my opinion, because children are hardwired to connect from cradle to grave. And if their connection needs are not being met, most of them, will either go into what's called a sympathetic rev up in their nervous system, or they will have a parasympathetic collapse response in their nervous system, which either looks like behavior problems or a withdrawn, isolated child. And so when I'm working with kids, and the majority of my practice are children and families, the phone calls that I get are either my child is highly anxious and cannot seem to calm down,
Mhm.
or a child who is having behavior problems that the parents just do not know how to navigate.
Okay.
And without going into exactly how I practice, which the way I practice, I call it the mountain method, which is basically when I'm working with the family, I will say, where are we at the bottom of the mountain? What do we want at the top of the mountain? And I'm going to climb a mountain with you until we get to the top, and then I'm going to graduate your family. But without getting into all that, we're just talking about the blackout today. One of the first questions that I ask is how much screen time? And I've learned over the years to multiply that number by about 3 or 4, almost like alcoholism, like, oh, I'm just drinking a beer a night, right? Or I'm a couple beers. But then in your head, you're like, yeah, it's more like 8. So, and so I've kind of done that in my head over the years. Of a lot of parents just don't know how much time their children are spending on screens. And it's causing really a lack of true connection between children and their primary caregivers, which is the research shows that the quality of the bond between a child and their primary caregivers in their formative years of life is directly related to friendship quality, how they'll perceive themselves, their ability to connect. And so it's really a much bigger issue, I think, than than we realize. And when I'm working with my families that come to see me, what I will many times tell them is this reminds me of cigarette smoking in the 70s and 80s. When you would look at the marquees and very successful actresses and actors, you've come a long way, baby, that kind of thing. And then 20 years later, it's like, oops, we had the research to understand what cigarettes were doing to our bodies. And the truth is, we just don't have the research today to know what is this doing to the brains of children, to babies, toddlers, who are looking at screens rather than the loving eyes of a mother or a father or a grandmother or an aunt or whoever. And so hopefully, is that helpful, Tammy?
Yes. And the other thing, and I know that this maybe diverts a little bit off of that home screen time, but I also find it interesting, so many of our schools now have gone to, you're in kindergarten and you have like a tablet or an iPad type of device that you're doing all of your work on, and so it's like we know that it's not great, right? We know that it causes disconnection, but now in our schools, some of that interaction hand over hand where a teacher would be helping, what I'm saying, you write and you do think, now it's all done on a device. So how do you, how does that kind of fit into this?
Let me explain to you how the blackout works, and then you can ask me questions.
Okay, perfect.
So let's just pretend you're a mom in my office. Okay. And I'm going to tell you about the blackout. Okay. So the 30-day blackout is when everybody in the family turns everything off for 30 days. So every iPad, iPhone, computer, TV, video games, we're going to turn it all off. That is when parents look at me like I've absolutely lost my ever-living mind. Okay. So I'm very used to that look, right? That is when I explain to them. So the first 5 days are going to be hell on earth. And I want you to blame the whole thing on me. I can handle it. Day 6 and 7 are what I call the door of boredom. That is when the children walk through a door where they think boredom is going to kill them. Boredom has never killed any child that I'm aware of. On the other side of that door, children become willing to do things they were not willing to do before, like chop vegetables with mom in the kitchen, go for simple family walks, play board games, dusting off the puzzles, the whole thing, right? For the next 3 weeks after that, I coach parents to replace connection-based activities for what used to be entertainment. During that 3 weeks, what I have found over and over again are children that hate my guts in the beginning for this blackout. And they write me thank you letters at the end of it, because what they really, really want and need is connection. Mm-hmm. They're looking for connection. So we have reality, and then we have virtual reality. Reality is when we are using our 5 senses. I can see it, I can hear it, I can taste it, I can touch it, I can smell it. Virtual reality means almost real. And all that it is very fun and very entertaining, it is not meeting the true connection needs of our children. Right. And so the next question I get is, how do we pull this off with work and school? That is, that's the next question I get. And what I tell them is, parents, you're going to get your work done during normal business hours. Mm-hmm. After your work is done, you're going to turn everything off. Right. I have many parents that have to leave their cell phones in their cars. And I actually do that myself because it's such a draw. It's a draw for everybody. So they'll leave their cell phones in their cars, and they just turn everything off from 6:30 at night till 6:30 in the morning. So you're not going to quit your job. Right. You explain to your children, I still have to work, but when I'm home, I'm going to be here connecting with you. With children, what I recommend is to get their homework done on their tablets in the kitchen, supervised. And all the apps, all the games get taken off of their phones and their iPads. So they get their homework done, supervised in the kitchen, and then you put it all away. And typically the families that come to see me are so ready for change. They're so ready for something different they have a child that is in pain and distress, that when I explain this to them, it's a real kind of grenade in the lap approach. And I get that. But they're really willing to do something different, and they get it. I mean, this is really not brain surgery. I mean, we all know that we're on screens too much.
Right.
It's just kind of standing up and saying, okay, I'm willing to do whatever is necessary for my children to be okay, and for my family to connect, and for us to be able to put screens in their proper perspective as the dessert of our lives rather than the main course. And so post blackout, what I recommend especially for children 10 and under, is called the Screen Time Marble System. That is where you give each child a jar of 7 marbles. Each marble equals 30 minutes to an hour a day of screen time. They are able to spend their marbles as they want to, maybe a little each day or maybe all at once. They get to decide. And then you have your own stash of marbles. So maybe that day you're having a great day and you want to reward your child. And so you give that child an extra marble. So, or, if they're being disrespectful, you have the luxury of taking a marble out of their jar. So it becomes post blackout a token for good behavior. And it's very, very helpful to a lot of folks. 10 and up, especially if the child already has a phone, what I recommend is a vendor called Net Nanny. Net Nanny will filter all violence, pornography, inappropriate stuff off of your children's devices. And then the Screen Time app, which will actually pause your child's phone after the allotted number of minutes that you give your children on their phone. And then, so basically, it's kind of the idea of, okay, I can eat 1,500 calories today. Well, I have 75 minutes on my phone, and so I'm going to have to use these minutes well.
What is that program that does for the minutes? It's
the Screen Time app.
Okay, it's a Screen Time app.
And the Net Nanny app is what I recommend for safe viewing for children.
Okay.
And a lot of my clients will hire an IT professional to come to their homes to clean everything up. All of their devices become, clean screen time.
Right.
So that's a great thing to do post blackout as well.
And after you're in that post blackout stage, do you teach families to kind of re-engage with this every few months or once a year, or what is your recommendation for that?
My family, we're in a blackout right now. So today is August. What's today? August the 26th. Okay, so today's 26 for us. And so it's a really great question, but let me back up for a second. So what I have found is that the 30 days that I recommend, many times families will choose to do the blackout again on their own. They will come to me and say, we have seen such major changes in our family, and we are realizing how much time we've lost,
right,
that we want to do this again. Post blackout, most families will do what I call a gray out. And that is where the family will do a Friday night movie night. So they're blacking out, but on Friday night, they'll have a movie night. Or they might do 30 minutes each day, or go ahead and do the marble system. Some will completely black out twice. Now, I've had one family in all the years I've done this, they did it 6 times.
Oh my goodness.
The father kept coming into my office and saying, for these reasons, they had 4 children, and the behavior problems were completely off the charts. But the father would come in for family meeting into my office, and he would say, for these reasons, we're doing it again. And I'll tell you that I've seen those children in town, and they run the other direction when they see me. And I don't blame them. I'm like, that wasn't my idea. That was your daddy.
I can just imagine the 6 months. But after the process is done, I know you had talked about before, obviously a lot of times our children become a little bit secluded. You know what I'm saying? They become a little bit more introverted, like more of that alone time. Some of the kids belong fixated, you know what I'm saying? Like where they need that device all the time. After this blackout process, have you noticed a huge difference within the children, behavioral changes, or have the parents?
So what I've found, and research backs this up, is that when a child's true connection needs are met based on their perception. So
Okay.
so a child's perception is everything. If they perceive they're connecting, then they're connecting. If they perceive they're not connecting, then they're not connecting. I mean, that's just the way it goes with kids. But many behavior problems will simply go away on their own if the child's true connection needs are met. Now, I do recommend, families to find a family therapist
Right.
to sort of help them navigate the more difficult nuances of what's really going on in their family. Because what I find is that you take all the screens away, and then what's really going on with the family presents itself. And then you have this awesome opportunity to reach out for help, to get the help that you really, really need, that a professional can walk you through. But without doing some sort of a blackout or whatever you want to call it, especially the children that come to see me because I'm a play therapist, what they're expecting is to be entertained rather than to understand what I'm doing in here as a therapeutic experience.
Right.
But to answer your question, is when children's true connection needs are met, many times their behavior problems just go away.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And there's so many, I have 4 children myself, and, I was right on, the cusp of when, all social media and all of that started. And I just remember it was like before Facebook, and it was before all of that. And just that transition and change. And I'm sure some other parents that are watching today can, definitely, are in sync with me on this, that it has become such a crazy thing. I mean, it's been now 20 some years and kind of out of control in a lot of ways. It's,
Right, right.
it's been such a
What I'll
change.
tell you is that the families that I have worked with over the years that have done the blackout,
Mm-hmm.
they really have a strong sense of boundaries and intentionality around how they want their devices to serve them rather than them serving their devices. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, in order for them to stay balanced, what I have found is most of them will do a blackout or some sort of modified blackout once a year. And that's what we're doing with our own family, because we're on day 26. And what I found so interesting, and I thought that we were pretty intentional around it. And we are compared to other families just because this is what I do for a living.
Right, right.
But day 5, my 6-year-old just had a complete meltdown over things that had happened years ago. We had a pony that died, and this was, I think, 4 years ago he died. And she just had a complete meltdown over it. Rodeo died, and I just miss him. And I'm thinking, in my head, I was comforting her thinking, oh my gosh, like this happened 4 years ago. And I
Right.
started talking through it with my husband, like right about then we would have been watching a movie. Right about then we would have been, you know, um, something that would have distracted her from what was really going on inside of her, that
Right.
would have prevented her from having an opportunity to grieve something that was really inside, but and needed to come out.
Right.
Um, so I share that because day 5 in the blackout is real interesting for a lot of families, because a lot of times the children are grieving. They're grieving that their screens are gone, and they want what they want, but they don't know what they want, and having to learn to ask for what they want. And it's a great time to teach emotional literacy for kids,
Right.
which for me, I just share emotional literacy for children is being able to say, this is what I'm feeling. So I feel, I need, would you be willing? So for my daughter Della, for her to be able to say, I'm feeling so sad about Rodeo dying. I
Right.
need a hug and to sit here and talk to you about this. Would you be willing to hug me and hold me as I'm crying, And the answer is a resounding yes. But what I've found with parents, especially with split attention, so if I have my phone here and I'm trying to have a conversation with my child at the same time, children in general, the story they tell themselves is, you're not with me.
Right.
You're not listening to me. You're not connecting with me. And so reducing split attention with parents is a huge part of the blackout, to really be present. I'm here with you right here, right now. I see you. I hear you. I delight in you. I celebrate you right here, right now, in this moment. And being able to ask yourself, what do I need and what does my child need in this present moment is huge. It's huge for families.
Yes, and I think, a lot of times as you were speaking about her with the pony and things kind of coming to light, is that so much of the time we have so much noise around us, whether we're kids or we're adults. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? From traffic to talking to phones ringing to our social media devices. And when you can take some of that away and extract it from ourselves, we're able to start to think about some of those things, and really start to process them, which is something healthy, so that it's not all building up,
Sure.
so so much coming out of this. And I just love that you've put this together. And now I know that you've put this together now in like a book format, right?
I have. Oh my gosh. So I started writing the 30-Day Blackout book last September.
Okay.
And I think it was springtime that I thought, I'm never going to finish this book. Like, who told me I could write a book? And I then partnered with my co-writer, Elizabeth Adams, who just wrapped up the project. And it will go live on Amazon in September. So we're going to do pre-orders middle of September, and I think it goes live sometime at the end of September. So the book is really written to walk a family through the blackout as if they're one of my clients to the best of my ability. So it's really kind of there's a lot of stories in the book that help you understand other families' experiences. There's questions at the end of each chapter, and lots of resources. And so the way I wrote the book was to help as many families as I could to implement the blackout in their own families without having to come to my office.
Right, in Nashville.
Yes.
So you're in a different state. You're able to do this. And I think that so many other therapists probably support this out there, that if you have your own family therapist and tell them you're going to be doing this process at home, that's something that they could work together.
Absolutely.
Together on.
And last year I spoke at the Association for Play Therapy International Conference on this topic. And I think there was 200 or 300 play therapists there that wanted to understand more about how to implement the blackout with their own client base. And what I've found in the clinical community is that what's happening is they're trying to help their clients to reduce screen time, and it's not working very well. It's like, let's have good boundaries around screen time. Let's set limits around screen time, but it's not working. And so I think even though the 30-day blackout is so dramatic, the reality is it works. And so if you can do a blackout first, then you can talk about limit setting after the blackout. Does that make sense? And then all of a sudden it's working.
Yes.
And
I think that I've seen more and more, I would say probably in the last few years, adults even themselves taking a social media break.
Correct.
I'm saying I've seen that, like, I'm going to be off of here for 30 days, or I'm going to be gone, and how healthy that is too, to just kind of walk away. But the biggest thing, like you're talking about, is that connection and being present. And we've lost a lot of that. And you're right. We are connected to people so much via our devices, but yet we feel empty inside. You know what I'm saying? It's not gathering more of a greater sense of, relationship.
The art of listening has been lost. And, one of the things that I use in my practice are communication mats. So there are two mats. One's a flower, one's a bee. If you're on the flower, your job is to open up and be honest and vulnerable. If you're standing on the B, it's your job to just be and listen. And I will do a whole session with a parent and child of them just learning how to listen to each other, because we have lost the art of listening. And so this whole idea of, the thing about it is, even when I'm doing the mountain method, what I'll tell families is, if you slow down, you will actually be speeding up. Because by slowing down, you're connecting well, which is getting you what you really want, which is the speeding up. And it's a really profound thing to watch, of a family blacking out, and then to stand on these communication mats and really learn the art of listening for the first time in their lives. And so it's really a beautiful, I'm a therapist, but I really think like a coach, you know? And I try to get children out of pain as soon as I can. And I have found that the blackout, even though they think I'm absolutely nuts. I mean, I've had children as young as 7 come into my office, like siblings of my main client will come in and say, Miss Stacy, I need to talk to you about this blackout. This is a terrible idea. I don't know how you came up with this, but you need to stop. Like, this is bad, you know? And then I've had other children that will go to all of their neighbors and become sort of ambassadors for the blackout and tell their neighbors, like, we did this blackout thing and I think you should do it too. Children as young as 7, I mean, they get it. They get it. Yes. That when the screens are turned off, that they get their true connection needs met, which is eye-to-eye contact, lots of unstructured nature-based play, and just the simple things that remind you of grandma on the back porch with some sweet tea and, you know, an old hand cranking ice cream maker, and, you know, let's put a 500-piece puzzle together. You know, I've had families do I've had families that have camped for the first time ever, fathers that have never taken their sons camping, families that have never been hiking together, families that have just forgotten the simple things.
Right.
So, yeah.
Oh, I just love all this. And I can't think of anyone that's listening today that doesn't need this in their life, because they do. They definitely, them and their families do. And even for yourself, or in your relationship or in your marriage. I mean, I think it would be a positive thing overall, you know?
You know, that's an interesting thing to bring up. You know, at the end of the blackout, as I'm climbing a mountain with a family, at the end, many parents will say, will you work with us for a few times just to help us to reconnect as a married couple? And many couples will say, our intimacy is stronger. We've decided to take the TV out of our bedroom. You know, we're not as distracted as we were. We're having more connecting conversations. So even, you know, the presenting problem is the child. Right. But the reality is I'm working with the whole family system. Right. And when the child is out of pain, all of a sudden the parents have an opportunity to really work on their relationship. Right. And so it's a great thing. It's a great thing for the whole family, really. But what I've found is that parents will do for a child what they will many times not do for themselves. So the child's doing you a favor by having a behavior problem.
Way to look at it. Well, on that positive note, where can people get connected with you? Like if they did have further questions, you know, obviously is there a spot like a Facebook page, obviously, that they can connect with, or email wise, or get on an email list to know when the book is launching?
You will go to stacyjagger.com, STACY, no E, STACYJAGGER.com, stacyjagger.com. That's my website. My email is stacy@stacyjagger.com. And then my Facebook business page is Nashville Child and Family Therapist. My first name is first, Stacy Jagger, Nashville Child and Family Therapist.
Okay.
And then my Instagram page is Nashville Kid Counselor.
Yeah, and maybe below this live, we can just drop those links below
Absolutely.
in the comments. We can do that so that it's easy and accessible. And if they get over to your website, will the launch date be on there? Or if they're following your Facebook, when the book is going to actually launch?
Yeah, I think we're going to start posting that in the next week or two. But if anybody that's listening that wants more information, just shoot me an email. And I'm happy to get back with you.
Okay, that sounds perfect. Well, I thank you, Stacy, so much for sharing with us this morning. Bright and early, and just excited about the 30-day blackout. I'm glad that our audience is getting the opportunity to hear more about it and learn more about it. So I thank you so much.
Thank you, Tammy. Enjoy your day. Take good care.
You too. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a fabulous Monday. If you want to know more about the On Air Advocate, head on over to onairadvocate.com. Or if you want to become part of our private community, you can head up to the top of this Facebook Live, hit the blue button, and that will take you into our private community. Thanks so much, guys. Bye, Stacy. Happy Monday, everybody.
Take care.